Hi and welcome back to Plastic Models by Regular Dude. Today, since I have put another project on hold for a little while, I am going to revisit an earlier project that I postponed as well. And this project is the Revell Messerschmitt ME262A1A that I was building for the Plastic Models for Beginners series, kit number 3. So if you remember, I left off on the last video with I had finished primary construction, and that's where I left off. Construction was done and I was ready to go with primer and paint. I then gave another update a little bit later saying I had had a disaster with the paint, and I was basically going to start over with the kit and just kind of I had purchased an older boxing of the kit when it was put out by Monogram. I had to order it for a part that I had lost for the front landing gear, and my plan was to rebuild the kit and repaint it, get it basically to where I had left off, and then take it from there. But after a little bit of soul searching and letting it rest for a little while, I decided to repair what I had done. And basically what it boils down to is I was using my nemesis of paints, which is the Vallejo Model Air. If you're doing a quick spray job and you're just blowing some paint on something, it works pretty good. It gives a really nice finish. It's kind of forgiving and gives you a nice kind of a satin finish, so applying decals is easy and stuff like that. And you know, the colors are really nice. However, I've discovered that and I know a lot of people just love this paint and they can just do wonderful things with it, but I can't. If I'm doing an extended project where I'm having to spray, spend a little time, I end up with all kinds of problems. The paint starts curing in the cup and chunks of it will break loose and clog up the airbrush. And while I'm trying to spray, then the clump will come out and a big old blob of paint will fly out and splatter up the model. And that's what I'd done. And I had some pretty sorry looking spots on it, so I was just going to scratch it, forget it. But instead I decided to repair it. And what I did is I sanded down the parts that got messed up, did some repainting, took my time, again using the same paints because that's what I started with. And I was able to successfully get that fixed. Now you can see where I've sanded it here and here, a little bit on the nose, but I've resprayed it, and once I get weathering and a clear coat on it, not necessarily in that order, it will be fine. So I am going to take up where I left off. Basically what I did is I painted it, or I primed it and then painted it. And I'm not sure if I talked about it, but I did made myself a template out of the kit instructions. I blew the instructions up to match the size of the kit, cut out the tail portions and taped it on there, so I was able to get the correct tail paint job. So the painting is done. The primary painting is done. So now I can start doing the detail painting. I can work on the landing gear, get those installed, and get the weathering going. I've also sprayed my masked off canopy. I'll be peeling that off here pretty soon as it cures up, dries well, and I can move on. So this is basically a video letting you know that I'm going to get started on this again. So I'm going to collect all my parts up together, and I will pick up where I left off. With all of the primary or the touch-up painting done, everything's ready to go. Make sure it's all pretty much dust free. I'm ready to do the decals. So I've demonstrated decals on other videos, and they're pretty straightforward, so I'm not going to really go over them in this build, because this is mainly about doing some scratch building and a little bit of weathering and stuff. So I'm going to go ahead and apply the decals. Now, one thing you'll notice is this doesn't look real shiny. I'm not putting a gloss coat on here because in using the Vallejo paints, they have a really nice smooth kind of satin finish to them. Not quite as dull as a semi-gloss, I don't think, or is it semi-gloss or satin, whichever. Whichever one is shinier is what this is. It's not a gloss, but it's not flat either. And in past experience, you know, with decent decals and with setting solution, decals work really nicely. You don't have to worry about silvering on this finish as much. So hopefully it'll work out in this case, and they'll turn out okay. So I'm going to get cracking with the decals. Once I have those applied, I will come back. Okay, one more quick note. I recently, well, actually it's been a while, got some of the Tamiya Mark Fit decal solution. Heard all kinds of groovy things about it. Normally I use Solvaset. This bottle here being, holy smokes, I've had it since mid-late 70s. That's how long I've had this bottle of Solvaset. I bought it at a hobby shop called B&F Hobby that's been defunct for years. But anyway, that's what I normally use for getting my decals to really snuggle down over surface detail. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to test this Tamiya Mark Fit, and I'm applying it as exactly as how it says to apply it. And that is, you know, you put some of this down on the surface first, then you put the decal, then you put some more of this over top. And I'm going to do a comparison and see how well this works in comparison to Solvaset. Experimenting on a model kit, well, sometimes you just got to take one for the team, and that's what I'm doing. So stay tuned, and I will come back in a bit after I've done these two Balkenkreuz on the wings, lower wings. All right. In this portion, first, ignore all the tape. I'll talk about that in a second. But in using the two different products, the Tamiya Mark Fit and the Solvaset, I put two coats. I put one coat, let it dry, and then another coat of the Solvaset. And as you can see there, other than being really shiny, it's settled onto those rivets pretty good. Okay, looks nice, molded on there really nicely. And once I put a flat coat on here after the weathering and stuff, it's going to look really good. The Mark Fit by Tamiya, not as good. I put three. Let's see. I put 3 coats on here, and as you can see, it didn't really settle over the decals or the rivets. It just kind of formed a grooved, humped up layer. It's not, the rivet detail is not refined. On the one side it kind of is, but on this side here it's not. So you know, I don't know, could be the decals, but I'm not so sure that the Mark Fit is as good as the Solvaset. Solvaset's been around for years, and I've always had really good luck with it, so I'm probably going to stick with it. And I know a lot of people use the Mark Fit and it works fine. And again, it could just be the decals, because these, you know, who knows who makes the Revell decals. They just may be stubborn, because even Solvaset won't work on Tamiya decals. Can be kind of tough, and Academy decals, you can forget it, because those things are so thick, it's unreal. So anyway, as far as the tape, As you can see, I've got this taped off here, and I've got this masked off here. I almost forgot, to do this, and I actually should have done this before I did the other layers of paint, but I was spacing it. But I need to paint these yellow and this stripe yellow. Now the stripe comes as a decal, but in a case like this, it would probably be far less frustrating, at least for me, to just go ahead and paint it. And that way I'll get an exact match between this and this, because yellows can be vastly different from brand to brand, and the chances of actually getting this to match, because as you can see, this is way more yellow, the color I'm going to be using, because I'm using the Tamiya yellow. Unless, no, I take that back. I'm going to use, nope, that's what I'm using. I am using the Tamiya yellow for this. So I'm going to mix up a little batch and spray it onto the front of the engines and on this stripe here, hence all the tape. So I'll spray that and let it dry, and then I'll be able to come back and continue working on the decals. Alright, the decals are complete, and I have installed the landing gear, and as you can see, I flattened out the tires to make it sit right, and I also guessed correctly on the weight on the front, so I didn't have a tail sitter. So that's pretty much all the parts. The only parts I have left to install are the landing, the front landing gear door, and then the hydraulic actuators for the, if that's the proper term, for the landing gear, main landing gear. So I think I'm going to call this video quits here, because it's kind of a good place to stop, because I'm not going to actually install those parts till after I get a clear coat put on here, because I want to glue those on last. Also the canopy has to be installed. So I'm going to end the video here. I'm going to on the next update I will be spraying a clear coat on here and getting it ready to start with the weathering process. So thanks for following along so far on this installment of the Plastic Models for Beginners series, and I will see you all next time.